Good morning. Welcome back to our series of video devotions from the Gospel of John. Since last time, you may have read from John chapter 4, verse 43, right up to chapter 7, verse 24. It's a big section. A lot has happened there. Jesus has healed an official's son. He's healed the man at the pool. He did that on the Sabbath, and the Pharisees were not happy about that. They've had a big discussion about Jesus' authority, his ability to testify about himself. Jesus has fed the 5,000. He's walked on water to get back to his disciples in a boat. He's claimed to be the bread of life and had a long kind of teaching section about that. The crowd has responded, his disciples have responded to him. And then he's had this interaction with his family about whether he will or won't go up to the festival in Jerusalem. And then he ends up teaching at the festival. There's a lot going on there. One of the things that in particular struck me as I was reading through this section over the last few days was about the response of the crowds in chapter 6. So the start of chapter 6 is where Jesus feeds the 5,000. Verse 2 says that a great crowd of people followed him because they saw the miraculous signs that he had been performing on the sick. So they're following Jesus because he's doing these amazing things. Jesus feeds them, this huge crowd with hardly any food. They've witnessed this next miraculous sign. And Jesus critiques them. He says they're not following him because he's doing these miraculous signs. They're following him because they want their tummies full. I think what he means by that is they're not so much interested in the why, behind why Jesus is doing these things. They're keen to see them, they're keen to be part of it, but they don't recognize them as signs. They're not thinking about what they're pointing towards, what these miracles are revealing. After Jesus feeds the 5,000, after he's walked on water, he makes this bold claim that he is the bread of life. He says, I am the bread of life. It's the first of these I am statements that we see right throughout the Gospel of John. At the end of that kind of long teaching section in the middle of chapter 6 there, many of the disciples are kind of chatting amongst themselves, many of the people who have been following Jesus, and they say that this is a hard teaching. Who can accept it? In verse 60 there. Jesus addresses them, but many of these people who have been following Jesus around, who have been kind of interested in what he's been up to, decide not to follow him anymore. They can't get their heads around the claims that he is making, so they turn back. Verse 66. From this time, many of his disciples turned back and no longer followed him. And Jesus asks his 12 disciples if they want to do the same. Peter makes this kind of amazing statement in verse 68 there, saying, no, we recognize who you are. And Jesus knows that not all of them do, but that's for later in the story. I'm struck by the reaction of the crowd in this chapter. I think for me, it reveals that there's some inconsistency between what they're seeing Jesus do and what meaning they're drawing from that, and the claims that Jesus is making for himself. There's something that they're not putting together between what he's doing, between the way that he's interacting in the world, and what he's saying is true about himself, the way that he's revealing himself. The revelation of those two pieces are not going together for the crowds. This passage is an interesting one about those two things, hey? Because Jesus feeds the 5,000, and then right after, he claims to be the bread of life. As we chat more about this passage, as you maybe think about it with your household or bubble, and also as we continue on in John, I'd love to invite you to make those comparisons. As you see Jesus do something, how does it compare to the words that he's saying, to those teaching segments in John? In chapter 6, as Jesus feeds the 5,000, how does that inform his claim to be the bread of life? And vice versa, how does his claim to be the bread of life inform what he does as he feeds the 5,000? As you draw both that comparison and many others that we'll see in John, I want to invite you to allow that comparison to draw you deeper, to give you a bigger and a deeper understanding of the revelation that Jesus is making. How does both what he is doing and what he is saying teach you more about why he's come, about more of what his mission is, more of who he is in the world? Friends, blessings as you continue to journey through John. I trust that you are finding some interesting things here, that God is meeting you in this text, meeting you by his word, and as his Spirit comes and dwells among you. I trust that he is challenging you about who Jesus is and what it is to follow him. So blessings as you keep reading. I would love to hear some of those things that you've been challenged by. Peace.